At 82, I've learned a lot about life and love, but there's one decision I deeply regret: remarrying at 60. At the time, it felt like a beautiful second chance, a promise of companionship, but the reality held complexities I never saw coming. I know many of you, like I once did, yearn for that connection, that shared journey after losing a spouse or living alone. The loneliness can be profound, and the idea of finding love again, a hand to hold, feels like a warm embrace. That's how it was when I met Arthur, a flicker of hope that soon became a bright flame, promising to fill the quiet spaces in my life. My family encouraged it, assuring me I deserved happiness, a partner for my golden years. My daughter, usually so cautious, simply smiled and said, "Mom, you deserve this." We had a small, joyful wedding. I remember feeling a lightness in my heart I hadn't felt in years, convinced I was stepping into the most peaceful, loving chapter of my life. A perfect blend of comfort and companionship. But once I got there, I realized the reality was nothing like what I had imagined. Life in a second marriage, especially later in life, isn't just about sharing love. It changes everything in ways you don't anticipate. Before you take that step, I want to share 7 hard truths I wish someone had told me before I remarried. My first hard truth about remarrying at 60 wasn't about love, but about living. You see, when you're older, you've built a life, a home, a rhythm that's uniquely yours. Every mug in the cupboard, every book on the shelf, even the way the towels are folded, it all has its place. So, when Arthur moved into my cozy little house, it wasn't just him bringing his clothes. It was his entire existence, carefully packed into boxes, ready to merge with mine. Suddenly, my perfectly organized kitchen had his mismatched Tupperware. My quiet mornings, where I enjoyed my coffee in silence, now had the clatter of his breakfast preparations. It was a constant dance of adjustment, a quiet battle over who got the top drawer in the dresser, or how warm the thermostat should be. I told myself, "This is love, Eleanor. This is compromise." But inside, a tiny part of me felt a subtle frustration, a quiet invasion of the familiar order I had cherished. That quiet frustration often grew into a deeper sense of loss, especially when it came to my personal spaces. I had a small reading nook by the window, a sun-drenched corner filled with my favorite armchair, a soft blanket, and a stack of novels. It was my sanctuary, where I'd retreat with a cup of tea and lose myself for hours. Arthur, bless his heart, had a passion for restoring old radios. Slowly but surely, his tools, wires, and antique radio parts began to spill out of the spare room and into my nook. One afternoon, I walked in to find him meticulously soldering, my armchair moved aside, a faint smell of solder in the air. "Oh, sorry, dear," he said, looking up with a smile. "Just needed some natural light for this tricky bit." I smiled back, said it was fine, but my heart sank. It wasn't just that my spot was taken. It was the realization that my quiet, independent moments were becoming rarer, always subject to his needs. I felt like a guest in my own sanctuary, constantly adapting, constantly giving way. It was a quiet resentment, a lonely feeling that even with someone right there, a part of my private world had simply disappeared. Truth is, when you remarry at 60, blending lives isn't just about sharing a bed or a last name. It's about blending decades of habits, possessions, and unspoken expectations. It's about navigating the subtle erosion of your personal territory, the quiet sacrifices you make for companionship. You might think you're ready to share everything, but are you truly prepared to give up the small freedoms that make your home, your routines, and your quiet corners truly yours? Because once you start compromising those personal spaces, those little rituals, you might find yourself missing them more than you ever thought possible. Remarriage isn't just about love. It's a minefield of wills, trusts, and family expectations. When Arthur and I first talked about combining our lives, the romantic part was easy. We focused on companionship, shared meals, and quiet evenings. But what I hadn't truly grasped was how profoundly complicated financial planning becomes when you're both coming into a second marriage with established lives, assets, and most importantly, adult children. It wasn't just my money or his money anymore. It was about ensuring our children, who had their own expectations and futures, were still provided for. The anxieties surrounding wills, trusts, and legacies felt like a weight I hadn't anticipated, a constant low hum of worry beneath the surface of our new happiness. My children, his children, and the inheritance unspoken. This holiday dinner changed everything. I remember that first Christmas after we married. We had both families over, a bustling, cheerful gathering. Or so it seemed. I caught a subtle glance from Arthur's son when my daughter casually mentioned her inheritance from her late father. It was just a flicker, but it spoke volumes. Later, when Arthur brought up updating his will, a perfectly sensible thing to do, the air thickened. He spoke of our assets, but I knew his son was listening, wondering what that meant for his inheritance. I felt torn, caught between my new spouse and my children's security. Even with love, the lines between his money and my money felt stubbornly separate, like two rivers that flowed side by side but never truly mixed. That night, the joy of the holidays was overshadowed by the silent, unsettling shadow of inheritances. Your love might be strong, but is it strong enough to weather family money battles? What I learned is that if financial discussions aren't handled with absolute transparency and care, they can lead to deep-seated resentment, not just between spouses, but between entire families. It's not just about lawyers and documents. It's about the emotional and relational costs. If you're considering remarriage, ask yourself, are you prepared for these unseen costs? Are you ready to openly discuss everything, from your current assets to your children's inheritances, and navigate the complex feelings that will inevitably arise? Because once those financial legacies merge, the ripples can affect everyone for generations. Hard truth 3. Renegotiating family roles. When you remarry later in life, you're not just bringing two individuals together. You're attempting to blend two entire family trees, often with deep roots and established expectations. I thought my grown children would be happy for me, and they were at first. But I quickly learned that acceptance for Arthur, as a new husband, didn't automatically translate to acceptance as a new father figure, or even just an uncle figure. I'd watch them at family gatherings, my daughter and Arthur's son. Polite nods, brief smiles, always a subtle distance. It was like an invisible wall stood between them, and I, in the middle, felt the chill from both sides. I remember one Thanksgiving dinner, trying desperately to orchestrate the seating chart. My daughter usually sat to my right, but now Arthur was there. Do I put his son next to her? What about my grandchildren? It felt less like a celebration and more like a diplomatic mission. I'd try to start conversations, hoping to bridge the gaps. Arthur, tell Sarah about your fishing trip. Or, honey, remember Arthur's story about the old car? But the conversations felt forced, often falling flat. Arthur's son would ask about his father, then retreat into his phone. My daughter would be pleasant, but her eyes held a guarded quality when she looked at Arthur. I spent the whole evening feeling like a social engineer, trying to smooth over invisible cracks. By the end of the night, I was exhausted. My original family felt a little more distant, and the new family still felt like separate islands, just politely sharing the same table. It's a hard truth to swallow, but your children, even as adults, can struggle deeply with accepting a new step-parent. They might worry about your happiness, your finances, or even just the change in their own familiar family structure. When you marry again, you become the primary diplomat, constantly navigating those complex loyalties and unspoken tensions. So if you're considering remarriage, ask yourself this: are your children truly ready for a step-parent? And are you prepared to mediate the emotional earthquake that can ripple through your family? Because a marriage isn't just about your love, it's about everyone connected to it. When you marry later in life, you say the same vows, in sickness and in health. But what I didn't fully grasp was how those words take on a different weight when you're both already well into your senior years. At 60, Arthur and I both felt healthy, active. There was an unspoken assumption, a quiet hope, that we'd continue that way, enjoying our golden years together without the heavy burden of serious illness. We talked about travel, about leisurely mornings, about simply being there for each other. We never truly discussed what in sickness might really mean for us now, not in the way we should have. I looked at him, so full of life, and just assumed we had more time. Then, life showed me just how quickly those assumptions can shatter. I remember it vividly, a Tuesday evening. Arthur was just getting up from his favorite armchair, reaching for a book, when his foot caught on the rug. It happened so fast. One moment he was there, the next, a sickening thud. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and hushed voices. He fractured his hip. What followed wasn't just a physical recovery. It was a complete transformation of our new life. Suddenly, my partner, the man I married for companionship, became my patient. I was helping him dress, assisting him to the bathroom, managing medications, and navigating doctor's appointments. My days became a relentless cycle of caregiving. The exhaustion was profound, both physically and emotionally. I loved Arthur deeply, but the independence I cherished for myself, the freedom I had just found, slowly evaporated. I'd look at him, frail and dependent, and mourn not just his pain, but the quiet loss of the future we'd imagined, and the loss of myself in the process. That experience taught me the hardest lesson about later life remarriage. Love can quickly turn into profound duty, a duty that demands every ounce of your strength and spirit. It's not enough to hope for good health. You need to have open, honest conversations about the very real possibility of illness and what caregiving truly entails. If you're considering remarriage, ask yourself this: are you truly ready for the intense, often overwhelming demands of caregiving, or are you hoping it simply won't happen to you? Because in our age, the what-ifs are not distant possibilities. They are often just around the corner, and being unprepared can change everything. When you think about remarriage, especially in your 60s, it's often about companionship, shared laughter, and a warm hand to hold. But there's another layer, a deeper connection that often goes unspoken, yet is profoundly important. Intimacy. We don't talk about it much, do we? Not openly, not honestly. Yet, it's a crucial thread in the fabric of any marriage, regardless of age. What I learned is that intimacy in later life isn't just about the physical side, though that's part of it. It's about emotional closeness, vulnerability, and a shared understanding that can look very different from one person to another. And those expectations, unspoken, can cause a quiet ache. I remember one night, early on with Arthur. We were in bed, the room dimly lit. He was asleep, or seemed to be, facing away from me. I lay there, awake, feeling a longing for something more than just sharing a bed. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was a desire for a deeper emotional touch, a closeness that felt missing. I wondered if he felt it too, or if his needs were simply different. How do you bring up such a sensitive topic when you've both lived full lives? It felt awkward, vulnerable, so I kept quiet. And that silence, that unspoken gap, began to feel like a subtle distance between us, even when we were physically closest. It was a loneliness I hadn't anticipated, a quiet unfulfillment. This isn't an easy conversation, I know. But it's vital. We often assume that because we love someone, everything else will just fall into place, especially something as personal as intimacy. That's a dangerous assumption. Before you remarry, I urge you to have those frank discussions. Talk about what physical and emotional closeness truly means to each of you. What are your expectations? What are your needs? Don't let fear or awkwardness keep you from this fundamental understanding. Have you truly discussed what intimacy means to both of you? Or are you hoping it will just work itself out? Because once those unspoken expectations build, they can create a quiet chasm, even in the warmest of relationships. Now, let's talk about hard truth number 6, different paces, different dreams. When I moved into the nursing home, I didn't realize I was giving up my routines, but with remarriage, it was different. At our age, we've all built lives rich with habits, comfort zones, and even a few long-held dreams. Our own personal bucket lists. I had visions of exploring ancient ruins or quiet European villages. I'd pore over travel brochures, dreaming of bustling markets and sun-drenched coasts. Arthur, however, was a creature of quiet domesticity. He was perfectly content with his garden, his books, and his familiar armchair. It wasn't a disagreement, not exactly, but a quiet clash of futures. I started to wonder, if our dreams didn't align, whose dreams would we follow? I remember one crisp autumn evening, I had laid out a map of Italy on the dining table, a hopeful glint in my eye. "Arthur," I'd said, "imagine pasta in Rome or a gondola ride in Venice." He looked up from his newspaper, smiled kindly, and said, "That sounds lovely, dear, but I think I prefer our quiet evenings here, don't you? All that travel sounds rather tiring." My heart sank a little. I had already started looking at flights, imagining myself packing that small suitcase I hadn't used in years. Later that week, I started to pack it, a little bit each day, filling it with light blouses and comfortable shoes. But after his gentle comment, the joy slowly drained away. I looked at the half-packed bag, then at the map, then at Arthur, peacefully tending his roses. And slowly, sadly, I unpacked it all. It wasn't just a trip I lost. It was a piece of the adventurous spirit I thought I still had. A dream I'd held onto since my youth, now quietly set aside. If you're considering remarriage, ask yourself, are you truly prepared to potentially give up some of your life's greatest desires for a new partnership? It's easy to get caught up in the romance, to believe that love conquers all, even your deeply held aspirations. But when you've spent a lifetime building your own path, it can be incredibly hard to merge it completely with someone else's, especially if their pace or their dreams are wildly different. Your dreams are still yours, and they matter. It's vital to have honest conversations about what you both envision for your golden years. Because once those dreams are quietly shelved, getting them back isn't as simple as opening a travel brochure. I looked in the mirror one morning, not long after Arthur and I had settled into our new rhythm. I saw my reflection, and for a fleeting moment, I didn't quite recognize the woman staring back. It wasn't my face that had changed, but something deeper. Before remarriage, I had my own routines, my own little quirks. I'd spend hours in my garden, or lose myself in a challenging crossword puzzle. But slowly, almost insidiously, those things had faded. My garden became our garden, mostly tended by Arthur. My crossword time often shifted to our TV time. My identity, the person I was, began to subtly morph to fit into our life. It's hard to describe, but it felt like I was slowly becoming a supporting character in my own story. The hardest part of this subtle shift was watching my friendship circle, the one I had cultivated for decades, slowly fade away. I used to have my regular Tuesday coffee with Margaret and Susan. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. After Arthur and I married, it became harder to coordinate. Arthur often had errands, or preferred we have lunch together. My friends understood, of course, but the invitations started coming less frequently. I remember calling Margaret one afternoon, hoping to catch up, and she mentioned a new book club she'd joined with Susan. They'd just assumed I'd be too busy now, part of a couple. I put the phone down and looked around my living room. It was warm, familiar, but suddenly felt very large and very quiet. I missed the easy camaraderie, the conversations where I didn't have to consider we. It wasn't that Arthur stopped me, but my independent social life, the life that was just onquine wine from Hinnerus, had slowly slipped away. I was lonely for the old Eleanor. This is perhaps the most profound regret, the one that truly changes you. When you remarry in your 60s, you bring a lifetime of habits, passions, and friendships into the new union. But if you're not careful, if you don't actively protect them, those independent parts of you can slowly disappear. You adapt, you compromise, and before you know it, you might find yourself looking in the mirror and wondering where the person you used to be went. So if you're considering remarriage, ask yourself this: are you still nurturing the person you were before, with all your unique interests and connections, or are you becoming solely a part of a we? Because the greatest loss in remarriage isn't just money or independence, it's the quiet erosion of yourself. Looking back now, after sharing these 7 hard truths, I realized just how profoundly a decision like remarriage at 60 can change your life. It isn't just about finding love again. It's about navigating a landscape filled with unforeseen challenges. I walked into it with my heart open, believing love would conquer all, but I quickly learned that love, while powerful, isn't always enough. It needs foresight, honest communication, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. I thought I was simply adding joy to my life, but I was also adding complexities I never anticipated. Complexities that, without careful consideration, can quietly undermine the very happiness you seek. I see my wedding photo with Arthur now, and I remember the sweet promise of that day. But what I wish someone had told me then was that the vows are just the beginning. Remarriage at this stage of life carries a weight that's different from a first marriage. It's a decision with far-reaching consequences, not just for you, but for your children, your finances, and your very sense of self. It felt like a temporary arrangement at first, something I could adapt to, or even change if it didn't work out. But once you commit, once you start blending lives and families, reversing course isn't as simple as you might think. Don't make the mistake of thinking romance is the only factor. I don't regret finding love, not truly. What I regret is the lack of foresight, the unspoken conversations, and the quiet sacrifices I made without fully understanding their cost. But I also learned that it's never too late to reclaim parts of yourself. Now I make time for my painting again, and I meet my friends for coffee once a week. My hope for you is that you seek a partnership that truly enhances your life, rather than one that slowly diminishes it. A second chance at love can be a beautiful thing, but it must be approached with your eyes wide open, ready to protect your own well-being and identity. So if you're considering remarriage in your later years, I urge you to ask yourself these critical questions before you take that step. Don't let the allure of companionship or the pressure from well-meaning family blind you to the practicalities. Is this truly what's best for you, or is it just what seems easiest right now? Have those difficult conversations about money, family, health, and intimacy. Talk openly, honestly, and without fear. Because the life you have today, your routines, your independence, your choices, is worth holding on to for as long as you can. Your future, your choice. Thank you for joining me today and for allowing me to share these deeply personal truths. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.